Herr is our next speaker. He continues the theme of empowering citizens to understand and influence government. He is a U.S. Air Force retiree and co-founder and president of the Center for Self-Governance. Led by the vision of the Founding Fathers, Mark's work is tireless to advance the Center for Self-Governance mission to institutionalize self-governance across the United States. Under his leadership, CSG has trained, over 6,500 students in 43 states. They have gone on to be in the legislative sessions and election cycle success for local, state, and federal. By the way, if you served in the military, would you stand? We'd like to honor you. Yeah. Very good. Please know how much we appreciate your service. All right, Mark, come tell us a little bit about how we can be involved in our own self-governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane Hardy. And Jim, I don't know where you are. Thank you to the Palmetto panel team. Haven't they done a great job? I've seen a lot of Center for Self-Governance students here. Zoe Warren, who's doing the video back there. Can we give him a round of applause? Jay Kilmartin, see Debbie Jones, Michelle Peterson, Diane Mitchell. There's just a lot of Center for Self-Governance folks here. I'm really glad to see you all again. And most importantly, I'm really glad to see all of you from South Carolina, our great speakers, trying to find ways and solutions to renew America's lost mutual pledge. 250 years ago, we signed a Declaration of Independence, and then we fought a revolution. We created a nation. So what I want to talk to you about today is something that most people take for granted, but very few people actually studied the understanding or the application of this principle. So I'm not merely referring to the study of government or the practice of partisan politics. I'm referring to the role of every citizen that they play in maintaining a free society through leadership in self-governance and the practice of systematic politics. So I created the Center for Self-Governance because of one simple question. What is self-governance and how do we actually practice it? But before I begin to tell you how that question led to our work today, I want to begin with a story from the early days of our country. In 1787, just months after debate in the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, when it finally reached its conclusion, Benjamin Franklin, who was elderly, he was exhausted, he was 80 plus years old. As he was walking out of Independence Hall, a woman approached him. Her name was Elizabeth Willing Powell. My wife spoke about her earlier. She was not a random woman in the crowd. This was not someone running up to Donald Trump with their MAGA hat going, "Oh, would you please sign my hat?" This was not a random woman in the crowd at the end of the Constitutional Convention. Eliza was a very well-respected civic leader in Philadelphia and a very close family friend of Benjamin Franklin. He had mentored her since she was a child. Benjamin Franklin became godfather to her sister, who she shared 15 years in the same room after her father died at the age of 12. At his funeral, her husband and her brother were his pallbearers at a 21,000-person attended funeral. So this was not a random woman asking a question of a founding father. Sign my MAGA hat. This was a very well-respected person. She was highly regarded, closely mentored by Benjamin Franklin. When Washington visited the city, he often visited their home. Samuel and Washington would often talk about farming together. But when Eliza and Washington would talk, it was about political ideas and policy. Now, mind you, she could not vote and she could not hold office. So she asked him the question, so doctor, what did we give us, a monarchy or a republic? We take this story for granted. I just want to reiterate what he said, because I know I'm repeating my wife, but it's really important that you hear it a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth and 100th time, including your children and grandchildren. A republic, if you can keep it. So that line has echoed through American history, but we rarely stop to consider the woman herself and what Franklin actually meant. A republic does not maintain itself. Freedom does not maintain itself. Constitutions do not maintain themselves. A republic can only survive if its citizens, despite their vote or running for office, develop the capacity to maintain it. So in other words, a republic requires leadership in self-governance and the practice of systematic politics by its citizens, in addition to their vote and running for office. So let me explain. So years ago, something happened in my personal life that forced me to confront this idea. Someone very close to me was threatening to commit suicide. I was exhausted, emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted, spiritually exhausted, and one day, a terrible thought crossed my mind. I thought to myself, maybe you should just go ahead and do it so this problem can finally be over. Immediately, I asked myself this question: is that self-governance? Is that what it means to govern yourself well? That moment forced me to confront something that became conscious in my deliberations. We talk a lot about leadership. We talk a lot about responsibility, and we talk a lot about freedom. But very few of us have actually studied what it means to govern ourselves well. So I began researching. What is self-governance? How do human beings actually practice self-governance? And so while I was asking that question about myself personally, something else was happening at the same time in our nation. The United States was facing a financial crisis, and I watched something strange happen. You just check with yourself and see if it matches your experience. The people in positions of leadership were making decisions that helped create the crisis, while claiming they were solving it. Again, I asked myself the question, is that self-governance? If individuals struggle to govern themselves and leaders struggle to govern systems, then what exactly are we doing in society? That question launched my 15-year, this month, journey in search of self-governance. Not as a project, not as a program, but as a daily search. What is self-governance, and how do we practice it? And how do we train citizens to do it? So that journey eventually led to the creation of the Center for Self-Governance, where our mission is very simple: to help citizens develop leadership in self-governance and the practice of systematic politics. But during our research, I discovered something even deeper. Most political conflicts are about partisan ideology regarding matters like taxes, education, healthcare, regulation, economy, defense, energy. But those arguments are symptoms of something much deeper. So, this deeper conflict begins with a very important philosophical question. What is the self? And I'm not here to preach about that, but it's a very important question. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, was warned the American people about this challenge more than 200 years ago. He wrote the following quote: "The qualifications for self-government in society are not natural. They're the result of habit and long training. Self-governance must be learned, practiced, developed." Jefferson warned that when a society has freedom without citizens trained in self-governance, the system of government becomes unstable throughout history. He described it like a ship. A political vessel of government without citizens trained in self-governance would be, in his opinion, all sail and no ballast, quote. Government would move powerfully, but it would lack stability beneath the surface and eventually capsize. So we have discovered 4 views of the self that I want to leave you with today, and I hope you will take a journey in search of self-governance. This first one, most of the human population believes that the human self was created by a higher power, God, Allah, a creator of some sort. But even among the vast population of those who agree on this point, thousands of different doctrines define how that created self should be governed with society. So I want you to imagine vast disagreements over school, city, county, state, and federal policies between these competing doctrines, just on the issue of abortion alone. While differences of religious opinion are welcome in the United States, other emerging views of the self are competing for control as I speak and restructuring the American systems of government. The second view of the self emerged beginning in around the 1920s, where others believe that humanity itself is the highest authority and there is no higher power. Within this worldview are competing philosophies, 4 of them. Techno-humanists, we talked about artificial intelligence. It is the latest emerging religion, beginning about 3.5 years ago. For example, just imagine where humans are merging with biology and technology. So imagine a paraplegic who is outfitted with technology, controlling a computer with their brain or walking with robotic assistance. Will cyber-connected humans still be considered human legally? And what does governing the self look like if you do not upgrade your biology? These are extremely important questions for state legislators, county commissioners, city councilors, and school board members to answer in the 21st century. The second doctrine of humanism is evolutionary humanism. This has been around since around the 1870s, in the United States specifically, where humans with superior genes outlive or outcompete with humans who have inferior genes. So, some questions. Is assisted suicide, abortion, or vaccine policies a reflection of this view of the self? And an example of the expectations of how one should govern themselves within society? Collective humanism, where the individual self is displaced by the collective self. Listen carefully. Is the new mayor of New York's statement about replacing the frigidity of individualism with the warmth of collectivism a reflection of his view of the self? And are his expectations for how the residents of New York, is that expressed in how he thinks they should govern themselves? The last view of only humans being the highest power is called individual humanism, where each individual self is the highest form of power. Consider, are school board policies advocating for furries, litter boxes, and gender transition without parental consent a reflection of the individual humanist view of the self and how that individual should be governed? Even when people agree that humanity is the ultimate authority, they still disagree about how humanity should govern itself. The overview, or have you guys heard of the view of the self called the oversoul? Another worldview believes that everything possesses a self. Trees, rivers, animals, humans. Under this view, governance expands beyond humanity into the natural world. Instead of relying on a parliament of human beings like Diane Mitchell or Jay Kilmartin, Earth would be governed by a parliament of all beings. Does the city of Everett, Washington, their recent ordinance recognizing the Snohomish River as a legal person, the state of Florida recognizing the human rights of a primate, New York's attempt to give personhood to an elephant, or Utah potentially recognizing the rights of the Great Salt Lake in the future? Is this a reflection of the emerging view that all things have a self? How is a human to govern themselves if the rights of nature, system of government, becomes mainstream? This last view of the self, I want you to listen as carefully as you can. I hope you don't feel overwhelmed by what I'm downloading. I hope you will take the commitment to learn leadership and self-governance, because the United States is not the same country it was when it was just a higher power and you govern yourself. It has changed dramatically. This last view is critical, and I challenge all of you, apart from me, to study this view of the self so you understand what I'm about to tell you. Some social scientists argue the self cannot be scientifically proven and should be discounted and disregarded in the policy development process for society. Their governance models focus on behavior, incentives, and data rather than a defined human self. They define selfishness as any human who believes they have a self to govern. How many of you believe you have a self to govern? This view of the self believes you are selfish. How does that compare to your view of selflessness and selfishness? You are not on the same page as this group at all. How would their policies for society differ from yours? I'll give you some examples. Does regionalization of education, crime, transportation, or weakening county government for a city-county consolidation, does that reflect their view of no self for humans to govern? If you have no idea what I just said, please take our training. When these views collide, in a society where citizens are not trained to maintain systems of government, polarization becomes predictable. It's crazy how we can predict it now ahead of time. Matter of fact, when we write our policies at the Washington Systematic Policy and Learning Center, we're not doing it from a reactive standpoint. It's now proactive, future-focused, typically 5 to 10 years out. Why? Because we can predict polarization based on your view of the self. In many ways, our nation has become a pledge-breaking culture. At the end of the Declaration of Independence, the founders, the architects, wrote the following words: "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." But within a generation, Jefferson and Adams became fierce rivals in the presidential election of 1800. Their politics shifted from mutual pledge towards partisan competition. And the consequences are unfolding before you in 2026. Deep polarization, broken civic trust, citizens disconnected from their systems of government. If America is going to restore a healthy republic, we must rediscover something that has been lost: America's lost mutual pledge. I want to give you some stories to make it tangible. Ben Clymer, he's the current chairman of the Center for Self-Governance Board, And he chose to put this idea that I just put out to you into practice. So listen carefully. Ben is agnostic. He believes humans are the highest power. He doesn't believe a higher power created in his soul. But after taking CSG leadership and self-governance training, he built a mutually pledged team with two men who should have been political enemies. Don Dix, a die-hard Christian and the chairman of the California Riverside County Republican Party. He's one of the co-founders of Act for America. Anybody familiar with Act for America? I think I see a hand back there. Massively, like Muslims, terrible. Don Dix. And he built a relationship with Ali Mashari, a Muslim Iranian refugee who fled the Iranian Revolution and later became a successful businessman and one of the prime arms dealer for the United States government. Three men, different faiths, different cultures, different worldviews, but they mutually pledged to each other. Together, they stopped a progressive political transformation of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and now the county sheriff is running for governor of California. They completely prevented a conversion of the planning department, the comprehensive planning department, which was developed and created by the no-selfers, that last group, the social scientists themselves. They completely terminated that comprehensive planning department. They helped elect another Muslim member of their team into the state legislature, who, by the way, currently is the United States Attorney for the city of Los Angeles, appointed by, are they appointed by Trump or Bondi? Anybody know? Does that be Trump? Okay, appointed by Trump. So one of our students is a U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles. Before his own death, Ali Mashari, a Muslim, was the primary speaker at Don Dix's funeral. Shortly thereafter, Ali died, and Ben lost his entire team. I can't tell you, unless Ben was here to tell you, how much that broke his heart. To this day, he still agonizes over the loss of what he calls his two brothers. I don't know how else to tell you that story other than to say that is what renewing America's Lost Mutual Pledge looks like. Can I give you one more example? So I'm the co-founder of the Center for Self-Governance, and I was labeled a white supremacist and an anti-government extremist. And I was placed on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list. I'm kidding. That list has been used by federal and state governments to conduct surveillance of American citizens. They have an offshore database called Whack-A-Mole with 23 million American names on it. Their OSINT, which is Online Intelligence Director Megan Squire from the University of Elon in North Carolina, or Elon University, lets Antifa, which is now designated a foreign terrorist organization by the Trump administration in 4 countries, allows them in the United States to have access to her offshore database. Now, you don't have access to this database, but the FBI does, because it's legal for them to have an offshore database. It is illegal for them to be a nonprofit with an onshore database of individual citizens. You're talking 23 million lawsuits. They're going to lose their $742 million in offshore bank accounts. For my part, instead of reacting emotionally to those labels, I chose to lead in self-governance and practice systematic politics. So I engaged our systems of government intelligently. So what's the result? A multi-billion-dollar corporation, the largest in the world, I'm not going to name it, ended their relationship with Southern Poverty Law Center because we were proactive. We knew how to predict their polarization ahead of time. We were no longer reactive. We weren't reacting to bad policies. We weren't fighting to stop bad things. We caused this multi-billion-dollar corporation, the largest in the world, to cancel their contract with SPLC because we were prepared ahead of time. We knew why they were labeling us. We knew exactly their infrastructure. We knew exactly how they were connected. And we organized strategy. And I am not a millionaire. I'm not Bill Gates. I deal in a couple zeros. I don't have hundreds of zeros at the end of my bank account. You too can learn leadership and self-governance and the practice of systematic politics and do the same. You're seeing that with the Palmetto panel. You're seeing that with your elected officials, April Cromer, Jay Kilmartin, Diane Mitchell, and many others attempting to lead in self-governance and practice systematic politics. But they need more of you. Is that right, Jay? Is that right, Diane? Not for you just to go get elected. They need you to be the Eliza Powells of the 21st century. Members of Congress began investigating this in this organization. Because of our work, they created the Weaponization of Government Committee. The current presidential administration has created 4 working groups investigating the weaponization of the federal government. Currently, discussions are emerging about whether the U.S. Civil Rights Commission should investigate whether the label domestic terrorism is being used as a partisan political weapon or a legitimate national security tool. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what leadership and self-governance and systematic politics looks like. That is what renewing your mutual pledge looks like. So here's my invitation. Self-governance is not a destination. I'll reach it someday. It's a daily search. A commitment to govern yourselves well. A commitment to maintaining the systems that shape our society. That is the work of Center for Self-Governance. Helping citizens develop habits in leadership and self-governance and the practice of systematic politics. So here's my concluding word. This afternoon, I'm not asking you to agree with everything I said. I'm only asking you to make a commitment. Commit to the journey. Commit to learning. Commit to developing leadership in your own life, because the future of a free society will not be decided by experts or social scientists. It will be decided by citizens willing to develop leadership and self-governance skills and the ability to play the political chess game of systematic politics. Citizens like Ben Clymer, citizens like Eliza Powell. People who choose not to react to polarization, but to govern themselves and build mutually pledged, self-governing teams. In 1787, Eliza Powell asked Ben Franklin a question: what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? Her mentor answered, a republic if you can keep it. For generations, we have repeated Franklin's answer, but tonight, the rest of your life, the real question is the one that Eliza Powell asked. And now that question belongs to you. Because the future of this republic will not be decided in Philadelphia in 1787. It will be decided by citizens today who are willing to lead in self-governance and practice systematic politics. So the question remains, what have we got? A republic? Thank you.